welcome everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Tonight will be discussing the demographic study performed by Dr. McKibben and to discuss future growth of our school corporation, which impacts the whole township. Welcome to our partners throughout our community. And with that, I'll hand it over to Dr. Wyndham.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Engelhardt. So, yes, appreciate Dr. McKibben and his work. As the board knows, we have had demographic studies completed 3 different times prior to this. Our last one was in 2021, but that was before we had the 2020 census data. So this is really the first demographic study that we have completed with the updated census data. And then we also wanted to time this. As the board knows, we're heading into redistricting efforts as we plan for our reconfiguration of schools to K-5 elementaries, 6-8 middle schools. And we felt like updated demographic information was a key piece of data that would help us plan as we look at that redistricting. And appreciate Dr. McKibben and his work to prepare us for tonight. We are live streaming this and also recording it so that it can be on our website and accessible to our public and anyone that's interested that couldn't be here.
I'd also like to add that Mrs. Woodward is joining us via Zoom. She's a little under the weather, so she thought it was best that she join us via Zoom, but she will be able to take part in this conversation as well, and so we're grateful for technology.
Absolutely. And I'm sure Dr. McKibben will introduce himself a little bit, but he has been very involved in many school districts. While this is his first demographic study with us, he's been involved with many other school districts around the Indianapolis area and really around the country. So it's been nice to work with him and get to see what he provides to school districts. So with that, Dr. McKibben, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all for coming this evening. 2 things I want to go over before I get into the details of the results of the population enrollment forecast. Number 1, these are forecasts, they're not projections. A projection is where you take a variable, usually year-to-year survivorship, 2nd to 3rd, 3rd to 4th, in your grades for the last 5 years, create an algorithm and use that to literally project into the future. Quick, easy, simple, cheap. Up until the mid-1990s, about all you had in the way of school enrollment research. The problem with the projection is they're almost always wrong, because the only way a projection can be correct is what's happened the last 5 years replicates itself over the next 5 or 10. And I don't know about anybody out there, I don't want to see the last 5 years again in my lifetime. These are forecasts. They're a 2-step procedure. First thing we do is a full population forecast for each one of the elementary attendance areas. Build a fertility, mortality, migration model specific to demographic characteristics and dynamics of each area. Looking at census data, births, new homes sales, existing home sales, much more important, household size, age distribution, and we lay our hands on to build these models. The results of the POP forecast then drives the enrollment forecast. So it's not your current or past demographic trends or enrollment trends that dictate it. It's your current and future demographic dynamics and composition. Second thing, don't let Spanish Fort, Alabama fool you. I was born and raised in Fort Wayne. Worked in Indiana demographics for 35 years. My doctoral dissertation was on Indiana demographics. As aforementioned, we've done over 100 Indiana school districts and over 2,000 around the country. Been doing this for about 35 years. Anytime you're doing a forecast, you have to have assumptions. These are broad socioeconomic and demographic parameters that we use to build the forecast models. And I have them all listed here. They're in the report. But I want to go through what I call the big 4. And these are the 4 assumptions that have the highest probability or possibility of having error in them, what we call systematic error and random error in any kind of a forecast. And of course, the most important one is B. The 30-year fixed mortgage rate stays between 5.5 and 7.5 for the 10 years of the forecast. A couple, 3 months ago, it was about 7.4. This morning, it was about 6.4. They're coming down, which is good. It's not going to do anything to help this summer's home sales, but at least it's moving in the right direction. Why is this so important? It dictates your home sales. Okay. And you've got to have a house to move into the district. And that right now, with the mortgage rate so high, remember, most people, in their lifetimes have not seen anything above 3 or 4% the last 10, 15 years. 7.4 is a great shock to them. But we're seeing them come down a little bit. The other problem there is supply. They already aren't moving, but that's a factor. But we're pretty confident. We probably want to get back down to that 5.5 sometime next year, particularly if Jerome Powell starts cutting rates this next month. But I firmly believe the days of 3.5%, 4.5% 30-year fixed mortgage rates are long behind us. The second one I want to go over is This is Indiana. Indiana is the only state in the country that has inter-district transfers, charters, virtual, and vouchers going on all at the same time. Okay, and we saw a bit of a shock last year. All districts did in Indiana when they raised the minimum income level for voucher qualifications to $226,000 a year. 96% of all households with kids now qualify for vouchers, and it had an impact. So we have the last 7 years of the transfer reports downloaded to our computer, and we have to hold as an assumption. So we assume in these forecasts that the district will have a net student transfer of negative 1,300 per year over the next 10 years. Now, you have about 135 coming in last year, 679 public going out, and then another 714 non-public. The non-public transfer rates, our number went up about 200 students last year. And again, the aforementioned change in the voucher law. We don't look for that to happen. So again, this year, they can't make it any more open than it is now. So we don't think it's going to go up like it has been the last 4 or 5 years. So we're going to hold constant at 1,300 net transfers. If the district changes their transfer policy, you would have to add or subtract the impact of that from the forecast results. But we're going to hold it at negative 1,300. The other two is Q and R. We assume the district will have at least 240 new single-family housing units constructed per year in the next 10 years. That includes apartments, townhouses, condos, and the like. But more important, 820 existing home sales. And this is where people get a little confused on the housing market. During COVID, and most people who downsize are in their 60s or 70s. The elderly just stopped moving during COVID, and they haven't picked it back up again, okay? If you talk to any realtor out there, they'll tell you the supply of homes in the market the last couple of years has been at a 20, 30, 40-year low. That's what's causing the shortage in supply. The realtors, seeing the opportunity, are pushing everything they've got on the board, plus trying to go through. But even with that, in virtually every school district, not only in the state, but the country, existing home sales make up 80 to 85% of your housing market. New home construction is only about 15 or 20% at best. Even at Westfield, Washington, we just finished a study for them, probably the fastest growing district in the state. Their new home construction is still only 30% of their housing market. And there's no way that 10 or 20% of your housing market can make up for a 20% shortfall in your existing home sales. There was a great piece on Bloomberg several months ago. They looked at the 200 largest metropolitan areas in the country, looked at their 2023 total home sales versus 2019. And in only 8 of those 200 were they back up to 2019 levels. Indianapolis was not one of them. Okay. So the issue here is you see where the average person on the streets, you get this building boom going on. They're building to beat the band. But total home sales are still below what they were 5 years ago. And I pulled up, I've got your latest Zillow report right next to me here. You got 110 on the market right now. You sold about 700 so far this year. So you might make the 820 I have in the forecast, but it's going to be close. But that's the true backbone of your housing market. The new home construction will have like an immediate impact in a specific attendance area. But for the overall district, if you're looking at the overall trends, what's your existing home sales like? And they're just barely making that 820 right now. So those are the numbers we'll be real careful on. Maybe we see a little bump here with the interest rates coming back down here in the fall. But most people with kids move between April and August. Makes sense. Kids are out of school. And we're beyond that now. So we've probably seen the bulk of households with kids moving in the district over for this year. The number one predictive variable for population enrollment change is not birth, it's not death, it's not even migration. It's what's the age structure of your population? How is your population distributed across the life course? Now, this is the district total for the 2020 census. Pretty easy to read. 0 to 4, that's your preschool. 5 to 9 is roughly elementary, 10 to 14 middle, 15 to 19 is your high school. 20 to 34 are the ages where most people have kids. 80% of all births occurred between the ages of 20 and 34 years old. You can have a total fertility rate of 9 if you want, if you can, but if you don't have women in prime childbearing age, you're not going to have that many births. 35 to 54 are the ages where most people have kids in school. There are some exceptions to that, but that's the vast majority. 55 to 69 is what we refer to as the empty nest households. These are the households, and this is where it kind of throws off people too. You got the Smith family down the road, been in the same house for 15 years. 10 years ago, there was mom, dad, and 2 kids in there, but the kids have grown up, graduate high school, move away. So it's mom and dad, that's it. So the household size went from 4 to 2. Same owners, but smaller household size. 70 and plus, what we call the turnover ages. These are the ages where most people start downsizing. Some will start doing it in their 60s, but the bulk of them don't do it till their 70s. All right. Now, when you look at this, you can just kind of move it forward 10 years. You can see a couple things happening, and there's several key points here. You'll notice where the 0 to 4 bar is smaller than 5 to 9. This is very, very common in suburban school districts because you have very few people in your 20s, prime fertility ages. If nobody moved in or moved out of the Avon school district, you just left your own demographic devices, your elementary enrollment would probably drop by about 400 to 500 students because the cohorts coming in are smaller. So over the next 5 years, you're going to have people moving in, bringing kids and all that. And people would like to just add it to what they already have for enrollment, not realizing those preschool cohorts coming in are smaller. Once you build up the size of that 0 to 4 cohort, by the time they're 5 to 9, you need about 400 kids moving in just to break even. When you do have households move in, the vast majority of them are homeowners, mostly in their 30s. And you'll see that in migration. You see your largest adult age cohorts, 40 to 44. That's going to be moving in. That's your in-migration flow. But you also look here at your 50 to 54. As they move forward, you're going to have larger and larger cohorts aging into the empty nest ages. And at the same time, you're going to have larger and larger cohorts aging into the turnover ages in the 70s. The problem for Avon right now is the growth of your empty nest households is going up faster than your turnover households. And it's probably going to, when it's all said and done, when you do add in the new households moving in, it's just about break even, okay? Now, these are the district level trends, and you'll see, I've got the ones for the attendance areas coming up, and you'll see that none of them exactly match the district. Some might come close, but they all have their own unique demographic characteristics. Okay. Cedar, great example here. Mostly homeowners. Hickory in the same situation. A much smaller number of people in the 20s, though, so a bigger deficit in the 0 to 4. Maple has a more even distribution of their population. The one reason for that is there's more apartments there. You don't come out of college and buy a house. You come out of college, you rent an apartment and then start your family there. And then they usually, most people don't want to raise kids in the apartment. They'll move out to a home in the suburban area, a lot of times in the same school district. Pine Tree, same situation, much more even distribution of the population. Little dip in the early 20s and also the 0 to 4, but also a higher proportion going into the empty nest ages. River Birch, again, closer to the district model. A lack of people in their 20s and pretty good sized deficit in the 0 to 4. And Sycamore, not quite as bad, but still same general trend at that point. Next slide is looking at the household characteristics and, A, what the district's like, and B, how each attendance area is different. You'll notice only 38% of your households have under 18 population. That includes preschooler. So probably it's closer to like maybe a third of your households in the district have school-age kids. There's not a school district in this country where households with school-age kids make up a majority. The last one was in Utah about 20 years ago, okay? And this number is slowly declining and has been declining a little bit since 2010. On the far right column, we have persons per household. Now, a very crude measurement here, mom, dad, whatever the point is kids. So when you see changes in household size, it disproportionately affects the under 18 population. Avon, like most areas of the country, saw a drop in their household size in the last 10 years. Avon dropped from 2.81 in 2010 to 2.75. Now, 0.06 doesn't sound like a lot until you multiply it by 20,000 housing units. If the household size had stayed the same in 2020 as it was in 2010, there would have been about 1,200 more people counted. The vast majority of those would have been under 18 population. So again, this matches metropolitan Indianapolis, Indiana, Midwest, nationwide trends. We're seeing a drop in household size. And of course, corresponding one reason for that's been the drop in births all through the country the last 15 years. Homeowners 35 to 54, about 42%. This too is dropping as you have a larger proportion of your housing units age into the empty nest ages. The good news is 65 plus is at 22 and slowly rising. But look at the range in there. You've got Pine Tree at 25, River Birch at 25, Sycamore's at 18, okay? And see a correlation on that same thing with home ownership rates. Hickory is at 91%, Maple, Pine Tree are down in the mid 60s, different dynamics between homeowners and renters. Renters on average tend to be younger, still forming their families, moving average every 2.5 years. Homeowners, as a rule, tend to have completed their family formation, they'd be a little wealthier, and move an average every 14 years. So two different complete dynamics. So the proportion of homeowners versus renters is very key variable here. Single person households, about 20%. Not surprisingly, the higher proportions are in the areas that have the more rental areas. But the single over 65, and these are the ones that are probably going to start turning over relatively quickly in this decade, probably the next 5 years. You see Pine Tree is far above the district average. Now, this is my favorite data from 2020 census. We can look at individual year of age by attendance area. And we can do two things here. One, we look at relative cohort size. I draw your attention to Hickory. 6-year-olds in 2010, 125, drops to 79, pops back up to 113. So you look at the year-to-year changes. Oh, we had this big drop this year, this big increase. It must be growth or decline. I'm going, nah, it's probably just a small or large cohort going through. And you can track those over time. These 5-year-olds in 2010, those were your kindergartners. 6-year-olds was first grade, 7 was second grade. But now when we have the fall of 2023, those 2-year-olds are now 5 years old. That's your kindergarten. 3-year-old is first, second, third. So you can track what the cohorts coming in are. District total at the bottom. Notice for the 5-year-olds, 756. The 6-year-olds were 804. You see the size of relative cohorts coming in, and it drops off to 751, 695, 595, 598. This tells us how many kids born in each age cohort need to move in just to break even. And as you can see, your under 1 population, which was born in 2019, is over 200 smaller than your first grade enrollment was, or cohort was in 2020. So this is pretty sizable deficit that needs to have in migration. And we do this for all levels, but the district level, we track this over time. And we compare your actual enrollment with what you had for census count. The numbers in red are the first grade enrollment for each year. So in 2020, you had 726 first graders compared to an 803 cohort size count in the census. That's about 90%. And that's about normal for your average suburban area. And then you can see going up, it goes up 87, we're down to 87, then 80, 93, and then 97. But if you go up the column, the 6-year-olds in 2021, now first graders, they're second graders in 22, they're third graders in 23. Notice how the proportions go up, 92, 95, 99. That's how we can measure the in-migration rate by birth cohort. So you can see it's going up in virtually all the columns. Of course, you're coming off the depth of COVID, but still a pretty healthy in-migration flow, all right? So there's clearly lots of people with children moving into the district and showing up in your numbers. But look at the kindergarten ones, and that's your far left hand on each of the rows. 79, 89, 92, 101%, 703. The problem is that cohort, it's 101% of 695. So yeah, the number is increasing over time, but it's still much lower numerically than the first grade was 5 years earlier. So it's saying this in-migration flow is enough to make up for your deficit of 0 to 4-year-old, but that's why you're not seeing as much growth as you might expect, given this number of people moving in. You have to fill in that preschool deficit. And your next 2 cohorts coming in are just barely 600 to start. So if they were going to break even with what the first grade code was in 2020, they need to be about 200 larger. That's a lot of in-migration. All this information goes into building the fertility, mortality, and migration model for each of the elementaries. This is the total for the district. And there's 2 ways to read this. You can follow an age group through time. There's 5 to 9s. That's your elementaries, 4,050, 4,200, 4,090, 4,020. Or follow an age group over time. 0 to 4s become 5 to 9s, 10 to 15, 15 to 19. Okay? So as you can see, rather substantial in-migration here between 20 and 25, almost 800 kids. And then another 150 as they go to 2030. Median age, that's the age where half the people are older and half are younger. Like almost every other area of the country, it's going up, going into the 40s. These numbers, this column here is called the components of change. This is the number of births in the 5-year period, 20 to 25, 25, 30, 30, 35. Births stay pretty flat because the number of women in prime childbearing age stays pretty flat. The deaths go up, not because of any disease or COVID, but because of the aging of the population. A higher and higher proportion of your population above the age of 60. Natural increase is the excess of births over deaths. You know it. Notice here it goes negative. Even before COVID hit, we had 4 states and 800 counties in the U.S. with more deaths than births. And even post-COVID, we're seeing this again. Indiana has 15 of them already, and they're picking up a couple a year. But this is the dominant demographic trend of not only the state, the region, but the nation over the next 15 years is the loss of natural increase, excess of births over deaths as the baby boom moves into its 70s and 80s. Natural increase has been the backbone of pop growth in this country for the last 200 years. Migration's just been on top of it. We're losing that factor. That's one reason why U.S. growth rates are dropping off. Net migration, 1,850. Now, people say we had more than 1,800 people move in over those 5-year periods. Well, you did, okay? It's the net. Your biggest in-migration flows are people 25 to 44 years old, bring 0 to 9-year-olds with them. Your biggest out-migration flow is 18 to 22-year-olds going off to college and people over the age of 65. The net effect is you have 1,800 more moving in than moving out. And that number stays pretty constant, even though you've got increasing number of seniors graduating off and going off to college, and increasing number of people, elderly moving out. You're going to see a continued strong in-migration flow of young households bringing their kids with them. All of this information drives the enrollment forecast. And the analogy I like to use here is a bucket of water. If I've got a bucket of water and I'm pouring water in the top, if there's a hole in the bottom, as long as I'm pouring in faster than it's going out the bottom, the level will rise. But if for some reason the hole gets bigger and it's now going out faster than I'm pouring in, even pouring in the same rate, the level will drop. Enrollment works the same way. What's the size of your K-1 cohorts coming in versus the size of your 12th grade cohorts going out, okay? Now, you'll notice here that over the, well, you can't see on this table, but you're averaging in the 700s for 12th grade classes. They're going to 900s here by the end of the decade and stay that way. And that's one reason why you're seeing a slowdown in overall enrollment growth. Not because there's fewer people moving in or more people move, well, they are more moving out, they're high school seniors. So you've got larger and larger cohorts graduating out. You'll notice the K and the 1 numbers stay fairly constant. You know, they're not that much change at all, which is why you see a flattening in the K to 4 enrollments. Now the distribution's different throughout the district, but the overall number, kind of a shift from east to west in the district in your distribution. Your intermediate enrollment does go up because you have not only people coming in with preschool age kids, also moving in with elementary age and some middle school and preschool kids, or not preschool, but intermediate and middle school. The middle school stays kind of flat, but your high school enrollment, the one that's most concerned, you've got a pretty sizable wave going on your current intermediate and middle schools into high school. And those numbers are going to do nothing but go up for the rest of this decade, peaking at about 3,800. And this is the number I have the most confidence in, because most of this increase in the high school enrollment, it's not due to in-migration, it's kids already living in the district. They're just going to age into high school. So you're probably looking at close to 3,800 high school students, probably by the end of the decade. then it'll start topping off as you have 900 plus 12th grade cohorts going out. You'll see the cohort sizes kind of evening out, and you'll be more of a modest trend there. All in all, the district, about 400, well, 450 student growth, about 45 per year. But the big thing is the housing market has to hold up. You have to have demand, which is going to be there. There's always people trying to get out of Marion County. The bigger problem is supply. Okay. We assume that as your aging baby boom population goes in their 70s, they're going to start downsizing and moving out. The peak of the baby boom is 67 years old this year. The front end of it is 78. You go forward 10 years to 2033, the peak of the baby boom is 77 and the front end of it is 88. So we're assuming they're going to start downsizing in larger and larger numbers as we go through. As long as interest rates don't go crazy again, that should provide a substantial housing stock for the market to allow new young households to move in. But that's going to be the key factor, is not so much building, but how many existing homes sell. You need to hit that 820 number. Think you'll make it this year. We'll see what how things shake out for 2025. But we use Zillow, Realty Track, and Realtor.com to do our tracking on that. So by April of 2025, if you've got 450 homes on the market, you're in pretty good shape. If it's 500, I'm probably going to be a little too low. If it's 400 or 350, I'm probably going to be a little too high. And at that juncture, I will open to questions. Stop sharing for a second.
Lots to digest.
Yes, it is. Everything here.
So this has taken in to affect the permits, I'm assuming, housing permits. We are starting to look at a lot of building of neighborhoods. So and maybe I missed it, I was trying to take some notes. Did you talk about how many permits we have been issued in the last year?
Well, with permits is you've got permits out there that were issued in 2017 yet that haven't been built yet.
That's true.
I'm looking at starts right now. At this very moment, you've got 23 new constructed homes on the market. Okay, so what we're looking at is we're assuming that 240 of those will actually be sold per year. Okay. Everybody got burned on that back in 08. Love to get this thing to work. But again, let me go back to the key point, 240. You need 820 existing homes to build. You could permit 500, 600 new homes and build them a year. If you don't sell any existing, you're going to lose enrollment. Okay. The number more to look at is you need close to 1,000, over 1,000 housing sales per year, new and existing together. And existing is far more important than new.
Hi, Dr. McKibben. It's Kim Woodward. You may have answered this or maybe not, but have you done any other demographic studies in Hendricks County? That's question number one.
Okay. Northwest Hendricks. Oh, geez. Who's your neighbor south of you?
Plainfield.
That's right. Plainfield. Brownsburg years ago. Those are probably the most recent ones. Why?
Well, I'm just wondering if on a greater scale, like especially Plainfield as a comparator, is there any, if you've seen one demographic study, have you seen one demographic study? Or is there anything to learn from demographic studies that have been done in surrounding areas?
Well, the ones that most people compare themselves to are the ones up in Boone and Hamilton County. You know, that's where a lot of the buildings going on.
Sure.
And again, a lot of it comes down to age structure. Yeah, most people in Carmel right now are shocked that their enrollment's dropping. It's not shocking us at all because of their age structure.
Right.
They've been empty nesting to beat the band for about 4 or 5 years now. Well, now it's starting to creep into Fishers, starting to creep into Noblesville. You know, these don't go into the other areas of the state, Southwest Allen, Warwick County. Um, you know, you know, just if you had an area that developed and had a lot of households built and moved in the 90s and the aughts, more than likely they're still the original homeowners there in most cases, and their kids are grown up, moved away, and they're empty nesters.
Mm-hmm.
People think they're going to keep having kids coming out of there forever. They don't. It's usually about 14 to 16 years as you see kids in school, you know, and the parents just don't leave. Some will leave. You know, people, oh, I don't want to live here anymore. I don't want my kids to graduate, going to move away. You know, 80% of the people don't downsize till after their 60s. You know, 60% don't do it till they're after 70. You know, that's where the real change is. Most of them stay put. And that's one big reason why your household size dropped last decade was because of empty nesting. So, and the other thing is you don't have people in their 20s. You know, no suburban school district anywhere in the country has enough 20s, early 30-year-olds to maintain their births. They need in migration just to break even. And Avon's no different.
Mm-hmm.
Or Plainfield or Brownsburg or anyplace else. You know, they've got to have in migration. If no one moves in, their enrollment starts dropping tomorrow.
Sure. Yep. Thank you for that.
And if anyone has a question, feel free. Lots to digest.
One thing I will say that as we have looked over Dr. McKibben's findings, it has, especially heading into redistricting, it has affirmed the decisions that the board has made getting us to this point. So when you look at kind of, as we think about having 8 elementary schools, we anticipate each of those 8 elementary schools opening somewhere in the 500 to 600 range. That's what we predicted when we decided on this model 2 years ago, 18 months ago. The 3 middle schools, it looks like they will open somewhere in the 800 to 900 range. And when we talked about having 3 middle schools, that was one of the concerns that our community shared, was they didn't want really large middle schools. And there are some really large middle schools in the Indianapolis area of 14, 15, 1,600 kids. Our community said we wanted middle schools that were smaller than that, 1,000 being about the max. And so as we've gone through this project, looking at his numbers, starting out in that 800 to 900 range is right where we had wanted to be. Obviously, we've got a lot of construction happening at Avon High School. As the board knows, 3 years ago when we were looking at different models, there was even more construction that we had master planned at Avon High School, and the school board said we don't want to overbuild. And so we designed this latest construction project to accommodate 4,000 students. And as you look, his projections are that we would be just under that at 3,800 by the early 2030s. And so I think the board's made really good strategic decisions based off of the previous demographic studies that we had and what our community told us. And then this data kind of coming alongside of it really sets us up nicely for this structure: K-5 elementaries, 6-8 middle schools, ultimately all leading to Avon High School. And feels like the project that we've got underway at Avon High School is just the right size for what we need at a large high school.
And if I can add, we're doing about 8 redistricting projects around the country right now, finishing up. And we've done several hundred over the years. I'll just throw it, you're doing it right, folks. So, and not many districts can make that claim. So go with what you got. I'm not going to name names. There's a school district down South Carolina right now that I've worked with, and they just built an elementary and a middle school they don't need. And it's going to be about 18 months before their taxpayers figure this out. I am so glad I just moved out of South Carolina. So I don't want to hear about it. But, no, this is, and you got to remember that Avon's got some geographic challenges too that a lot of districts that don't have. I guess the one that I think would be closest to you guys, probably Westfield, Washington, where they have all of their primary growth in the south and the east, and everything's going up north and west. You developed first in the east and it's kind of going out to the west, and you've seen more and more growth, particularly building construction out in the west. Well, this is all true, but while this is going on, your east is empty nesting, and if you look at a lot of the school districts around metropolitan Atlanta, Cobb County is the same way. They built all their schools in the east and this building went west. So now they've got all their buildings where the kids aren't and all their kids where the buildings aren't. So it's really a problem for them. Their attendance areas are really funky looking. So, it's trying to balance, because the thing is, when you pick to build a school, you're stuck with it there for 50, 60, 70 years. That's why you tell districts that site selection is so important when you build a school, and the last thing you want to do is build them close to each other. So you guys with your plan, actually in pretty good shape. I mean, and you've got a lot of restrictions on, land availability, transportation issues, things like that, race, ethnicity, socioeconomics, trying to balance those out, very challenging, but at least you're addressing them to the best of your abilities, given the constraints of geography and demographic dynamics.
One thing just for our community to know too, one of the reasons why we engaged Dr. McKibben was that he is involved and can be involved with redistricting, and we have not had that in previous redistrictings. So Dr. Sullivan is getting ready to lead a group. We've pushed that out to all of our parents, all of our staff, if they want to be involved in redistricting. Last we checked, we had about 150 people that were interested in being a part of that and learning about all the decisions that go into redistricting. But one of our goal is that through about 6 or 7 meetings with Dr. Sullivan and our transportation team, we will, that committee will help us narrow down to 2 models of drawing boundary lines that we can send to Dr. McKibben. He can plug it into his system and help us project out what those elementary boundaries would look like 10 years from now. We have not had that level of specificity in the past. Those of you that were on the board when we opened new expanded Maple, we about doubled the size of Maple and we redistricted, and the year we opened it, Maple was overcrowded. And so that was an area where we looked back and thought, okay, we might have done that differently if we knew now what we knew then. If we knew then what we know now. So excited to have his support to come alongside that committee and help us make really good decisions that hopefully make these schools right-sized as we go through this significant structure. It's difficult to redistrict. It tends to be more difficult on parents than it is kids. But it is difficult. It's a difficult transition, and so we only want to do it once and try to get it right and not have to turn around and do it again in a couple of years because we missed a mark. And so I think with his support, we'll hopefully be able to make better data-informed decisions about what those boundaries will look like when we bring those to you. Our current timeline, we would have a final recommendation to you in November after we go through the committee work. Dr. McKibben does his analysis and then bring a final recommendation in November.
You also provide a middle school breakdown?
Yes.
Because that's, to me, it's going to be
Yeah.
the big surprise. Is how those, because we've never had that type of boundary.
Right.
So,
And it's always been interesting. 36 in our district, US 36, has been a great dividing line. And North Middle School and South Middle School have been so evenly, I thought you were sitting over there, Dan. And Hines is over here, former principals at those buildings. We have always kind of marveled that that arbitrary line of US 36 created really balanced middle schools between North and South. And so that's one of the things that we'll be working with the redistricting committee on, is we want to find that same balance. It's just not going to be as clear cut as US 36 once we add the third middle school into the mix.
is that it?
Yeah.
All right. No further questions. We will adjourn our working session. Dr. McKibben, thank you so much.
Thank
It's
you.
such a
My
pleasure
pleasure.
working with you. I've learned a lot. I'm just really excited to see our end product when we get through redistricting. So thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Have a good rest of the meeting.
Thank you.
Bye.